evening, everybody. Thank you for braving the parade, the traffic, the snafus to come out tonight for this important event. We're super excited about it. So my name is Alicia Slook. I'm with the Loudoun League of Women Voters, part of the educational committee with my colleague here, Ann Schmidt and Linda Maggioroni in the back. And we have a bunch of other members here too. And we are very happy to have you here to listen to our speaker. So a couple of pieces of business. Please, as a courtesy, silence your cell phones. If you want to avail yourself of water or snacks at any time, they're up here on the table. And I also want to thank, although she is still stuck in traffic, our partner with the Loudoun County Public Libraries. They agreed to partner with us for an educational series, and this is the first in that series. And it's nice to see so many people turn out, so I think it will ensure they're going to continue to want to provide a forum for us. But I want to thank Lorraine Moffa, and hopefully she's going to appear, because she's the programs coordinator for the Loudoun County Public Libraries. So thank you to her. So, I'm going to do something I don't like to do, but I have to do it because I've been so busy this week being an election officer. I'm going to read because I don't want to leave out any of the salient details about our illustrious speaker. So, without further ado, Liz White is the founding executive director of UpVote Virginia and the former deputy director of the One Virginia 2021 Foundation. After spending the better part of the last decade on nonpartisan redistricting reform, she wanted to expand the scope of her democracy reform work to elevating the voices of Virginia voters through policies like ranked choice voting. Liz helped grow Virginia's redistricting reform movement, including developing and leading the Presence at the Polls program, which sends volunteers to polling places during elections to educate voters about nonpartisan issues. Liz has a Bachelor of Arts from the College of William and Mary and comes from a background in the arts. She told me that she was involved in theater in college, and she was very critical in helping us make the staging setup in here. She currently lives in Chesterfield, and again, brave the traffic and everything else to come out to us in Loudoun tonight. She lives in Chesterfield with her husband and her 2 children, who absolutely are mad about Halloween, and they're doing a family costume. Maybe she'll tell us more about that in a little bit. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce Liz White.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out on a Thursday night. I know this time of year is between politics and elections and fall festivals and trunk or treats, and it's an insanely busy time. Thank you so much for giving some of your time to us tonight. Yes, as Alicia said, I'm Liz. I'm the executive director of UpVote. I know you all are filming. Can you see me if I stand here so I can click my slides? Is that okay? Okay. Great. Does everyone have, before we get started, does everyone have a cookie ballot?
Yeah.
Okay. You have plenty of time to fill them out. This is high stakes, this election, so give it careful consideration. You do not have to rank all of the cookies if you don't like all of the cookies. We'll get into the why of that. But if you could fill these out, in the next, I'd say 10 minutes or so, we are going to use them later, so hang on to them. Okay, great. So what is ranked choice voting? Oh my gosh, okay, also don't look at that screen because it's gonna be distracting, but you can look over there and you can look back here behind me. So what is ranked choice voting? Ranked choice voting, actually, before I tell you, no one. Raise your hand if you feel like you could explain ranked choice voting to somebody else. Maybe a little. No, you can. Okay, perfect. That's what I love. I love a kind of a mixed group. We're gonna all go back to square one and learn together. And by the end of the hour, everyone's answer to be here. You guys are gonna be excellent. Okay, here's part of the answer. Ranked choice voting is a simple change to the way the ballot is designed and the way voters get to express our preferences that lead to better voter experience, better campaigns, and ultimately, we believe, better government. All it means, and you've already done it tonight, all it means is that instead of going to a table full of cookies and only getting to pick your one favorite, you get to say, well, this is my favorite, Oh no, they've run out. I need to pick a second favorite, and I'm gonna rank my backup choices. That's all it means for the voter. Again, you all have already done it, you're ahead of the game. So the way it works, kind of the technicality and the tabulation of it, the goal for ranked choice voting, and I'm gonna put a little asterisk here and say that for tonight, I am only talking about elections with one winner. So one mayor or one board of supervisors member, one delegate, not like a multi-member city council race where you vote for your top three. That's, you'll have to invite me back, it's a slightly more complicated process. But for tonight, if you're only electing one person to represent an entire electorate, mathematically, the best we can ask for is that they at least get over 50% of the vote. We can only put that floor in at 50%. And that seems like not too much to ask, right? You should be someone that at least half your voters support. So that is our goal with ranked choice voting. So we're gonna have everybody rank their preferences. We're gonna count up all the first choice votes. That's all we're looking at initially. We're looking at everyone's first choice. If somebody gets half of those first choice votes, we get to go home early. It was easy. You got a runaway favorite. Didn't need ranked choice voting this time. It's fine. But I mean, you all know about, we were just talking about the congressional primaries last year, where you had 12 Democrats running for one nomination. And that's not that unusual. We just had 6 people run for LG. We had 7 people run in the primary in the 7th district. We get crowded fields of candidates, especially in primaries in Virginia, and sometimes we see that in local elections as well. And the more candidates you get in these crowded fields, the less likely it is that you're gonna get someone with outright 50% plus support. So, if no one gets to 50%, we're gonna eliminate the candidate with the fewest first choice votes. If that's your candidate, now your vote's gonna go count for your second choice. It's a lot like a caucus, it's a lot like a runoff. If your first choice was not an option, where would your vote have gone? So if you get to that second round and your first choice has been eliminated, you get to stay in the conversation, you get to stay in the proverbial room. Your vote goes to your next candidate, your next preference. We're gonna repeat that process until somebody crosses that 50% threshold. And I see some of you furrowing your eyebrows, and that is fine. Now we're gonna do it again with pictures. So let's say this is a primary, it's a 4-candidate primary. Turquoise has a pretty healthy 44% of the vote, which I think most of us, being used to a first past the post, winner take all election style, would look at this and go, yeah, that's pretty impressive. 4 people, 44%, it's not bad, all right. But without ranked choice voting, this is all the information we have. We know how 44% of voters feel about turquoise. We have no idea how the other 56% of the voters feel about turquoise. They could be okay with turquoise, but just like their candidate a little bit more, or they could think turquoise is the worst thing that could possibly happen for them. And they could just find turquoise polarizing and divisive and not want someone like that at all. 44% might be turquoise's ceiling. We have no idea. So with ranked choice voting, we're gonna get more information. And if 44% is turquoise's ceiling, then ranked choice voting is now a safeguard against a polarizing and divisive candidate who couldn't ever get to 50%. So let's see what happens. So we're going to eliminate dark purple. If you're a dark purple voter, your vote now transfers to your second choice. Goodbye, dark purple, thank you so much, great job. Let's see where those votes go. In this very simplified example, it turns out turquoise and lilac and dark purple probably shared a lot of ideological policy positions. Maybe there are similar types of candidates. Maybe turquoise just knocked a lot of doors in dark purple neighborhoods. And so dark purple voters, it turns out, were pretty evenly split, but a bigger portion went to turquoise. Turquoise is almost at 50%, but not quite, so we're gonna keep going. We're gonna eliminate orange. We're gonna see where orange's voters go. And again, in this highly simplified example, enough of them went to turquoise that turquoise is now well above the majority threshold. So we can feel good that we've elected someone that at least let's say that's 56, that at least the majority of voters support. Maybe not as their first choice, but enough to cast a vote for them. And we know turquoise now has a mandate, and we know that turquoise had to go out and get those other votes. They had to go knock doors in neighborhoods they don't usually knock doors in. They had to have conversations with voters they might not usually talk to. They could not just rely on their base. They had to go build a coalition to cross that 50% line, which is going to make them better at their job. Once they're in office, they're going to have more information from their community. They're going to have built a coalition. It should make them better. So, all right, that's how it works. Why now? Ranked choice voting, as my new friend Rex knows, ranked choice voting has been around globally for over a century. Australia has used versions of it for 100 years. Ireland has used a version of it for 100 years. Lots of other countries have used different versions of some kind of preferential voting system, like ranked choice. In the US, it's a newer conversation, but it's doing it cutting edge. Utah, of all places, if I asked you to name me a state that's cutting edge electoral reform. But Utah has had a local option since the 90s. And so different cities and counties in Utah have been using ranked choice voting for local elections since the 90s. A lot of them have dropped off now that it's become a more partisan issue, and I'll get into that later. But again, that's someone who went to high school in the 90s, like this 100 years ago. But it's been around for a while. But in Virginia, it's pretty new. So I like to hope people are hearing it more and more. Brought you all out tonight. So I do think there's an element of like, well, why now? Why is it suddenly in the news? Why is it suddenly something we're hearing about? And I think it's two reasons that you see here. One is just the state of our politics. It's been bad. It's been partisan. It's been tribal. It's been this huge chasm between the left and the right for a while, but it's just getting worse and not better. It is a zero-sum game in a lot of places. The incentive structure for this are such that any kind of compromise, any kind of communication, any kind of nuance is not only not rewarded, it's often punished with a primary, right? So that just continues to get us more and more into the mess we're in. The other part of why ranked choice voting is good now should be good news. More and more people are stepping up to run for office, and more different kinds of people are stepping up to run for office. People from different backgrounds, people with different perspectives and lived experiences, different voices. This should be unqualified good news. But then you get a 12-person primary and a winner with a margin in the 30s. Or you get a city council member who's elected with 27% of the vote, which has actually happened and multiple times. So we don't have, our election structure needs to be updated to accommodate the influx of people who want to stand up and represent their communities. So we're going to talk about why ranked choice voting solves those issues in this next section. So benefit one, RCV virtually ensures a majority voter, or a majority winner. I mean, we covered this kind of, I think, in just the structure of what ranked choice voting is. I think voters just a lot of times, I mean, if you're in that 56%, or if your city council member was elected with 27%, if you're going to be 73% of voters who did not vote for that person, you're going to feel really unrepresented, you're going to feel unheard, and even if you're kind of fine with them, it's not who you voted for. You didn't get a say in that election. So especially, I think, in a primary, if there's a faction of the base that's big enough to get someone to victory, and they're just in the rest of the group, it can be very frustrating, it can be disheartening, it can dampen people's willingness to participate in politics. It's already a big ask to be civically engaged all the time, especially in Virginia, where it's just never-ending election season. So we want to incentivize voters with more voice. And it also just means, again, I mentioned, that if a candidate is only appealing to one part of their base, they cannot win. If it's 50% plus, then that's not really a faction anymore, that's the base. But if it's just 30% 30%, and they're like, it's fine, there's a lot of candidates, I will get that 30%, it's gonna be enough. That's the kind of candidate with that ceiling we talked about, who is not gonna be able to lead in a ranked choice voting election. And will protect voters from a polarizing, unpopular, divisive candidate. Ranked choice voting does encourage and reward candidates who build that consensus, who build those coalitions. As we saw, so took 3 colors on my lovely graph to get turquoise to victory. You have got to go talk to not only your own voters, your own supporters, but you do have to have that deep support. You have to have first choice votes to stay in the game. So you got to be somebody's favorite. But you also want to go get broad support. You want to be able to say, I know you have a Shane Crow yard sign in your on your lawn, but let me tell you about me and ask for your second choice vote. You can go knock on every door. No one's going to stop you because you're not asking for only, again, that zero-sum game. You're not asking for their only vote. They have more nuanced selections to make. So it leaves room for nuance. In a primary especially, I'm going to go to the next slide and kind of circle back around. Ranked choice voting diminishes the idea of campaigning. So if you're in a primary, and we see this a lot, primaries, they beat itch, you guys. I know they're necessary. I hate them. I hate watching people who agree on 99% of issues have to go for personal attacks because it's the only thing that differentiates them. With ranked choice voting, that's not going to work. If you go to somebody else's voters and you say, I heard they kick puppies, well, maybe you get a couple people who are really gullible, but most of that person's voters are going to say, why did Liz say such horrible things? I hate her, she's dead to me, not getting any of my votes. Now, if that candidate is eliminated before me, I don't get any of those votes. Whereas if I had gone and said, if you've got a Shane Crow yard sign, if I said, yeah, let me tell you about what Shane and I have in common. Let me ask for your second choice vote. Well, now if Shane's eliminated first, I get all those votes. And I need those votes to get me to the majority threshold. So it doesn't work. This awful, especially these personal attacks, they don't work. So voters hate them, right? I mean, I feel like everyone in this room, no one's like, oh, yes, an attack act where they go after someone's kids. Like, no one likes this, but it must work because it's a multi-million-dollar industry. This changes the structure to make it not worth doing. And that's the only way that we're going to get past that. In Alaska, we mentioned earlier, so in 2022, literally the day our organization launched, there was a special election in Alaska. It was the most high-profile RCD election probably to date in the US. And it was Sarah Palin, who's a household name, and she was running in a special election to replace so they have one congressional representative, and he passed away after 40-something years in office. And he passed away a couple months before the regular congressional primary. So they had just passed this big reform package with ranked choice voting and open primaries and campaign finance laws, and they had to kind of scramble to put it in place about 3 or 4 months ahead of when they thought they were going to have to. So Sarah Palin, again, you'll have to invite me back. I can do an hour on Alaska. But Sarah Palin ended up being in the general election with an independent, another Republican, and a Democrat. The independent dropped out. Again, so many moving parts, so many confusing things for Alaskans. So you've got 2 Republicans and a Democrat. Now, traditional elections would mean that those Republicans are going to have to go after each other because they are afraid of splitting the Republican vote. In ranked choice voting, if Alaskan voters wanted a Republican, they could rank them 1 and 2, one of them is going to win. But they did not embrace ranked choice voting. They did not even attempt to operate within this new structure. They just went after each other. Sarah Palin and the other Republican, Nick Damage, went after each other, leaving Mary Peltola, the Democrat, to run this sunny issues-based campaign with no one coming after her, and she ended up winning because She got the most first choice votes, which, okay, she had about 40-something% of the vote. And then Sarah Palin and then Nick Begich. So we eliminate Nick Begich. Only half of his voters voted for the other member of his party. Now, Sarah Palin's also wildly unpopular in Alaska. I think, if you don't live in Alaska or you don't follow Alaskan politics, like a big nerd, you go, oh, well, sure, like she's a very prominent Republican in Alaska. They don't like her. Her disapproval ratings are in the 60s. And it's not name ID, right? Everyone knows who she is. So there's also that complicating it, and she also just ran this terrible campaign. So only 50% of Nick Begich's voters voted for her. 30% voted for the Democrat, Mary Peltola, and 20% didn't rank anybody second because they've been told not to. So that was the difference between Sarah Palin winning and losing. So I have people all the time who say, oh, well, ranked choice voting kept Sarah Palin out of Congress. Now, sometimes they say, ranked choice voting kept Sarah Palin out of Congress. I sometimes they say, oh, ranked choice voting kept Sarah Palin out of Congress. But either way, I mean, Sarah Palin being an unpopular individual and not playing by the RCV rules, not building the coalition, using negative campaigning, that's what kept Sarah Palin out of Congress. So Mary Peltola did win that special election. She won a full term, and then she lost to Nick Begich in the next term. So anyone who feels like RCV subverted the will of Alaskan voters, it didn't. They may have shifted, they may have changed their minds, but they had their preferences on.
Question?
Yeah.
So that was a general election. They promoted primaries for that special?
Yeah, so they do an open primary, they do a nonpartisan primary. Everybody who wants to run for office, regardless of party, runs at the same time. So, because this man had been in office for almost a half a century, 48 people ran in that primary. It was everyone from Sarah Palin to a man named Santa Claus, who was a city council member in North Pole, Alaska. I'm so serious. The best. It's the best story. So 48 people ran in this primary. Voters had to show up, and you just pick one in the primary. And then the top 4 vote getters go on to the general, and they use ranked choice voting.
That's how you got multiple Republicans.
That's how you got. So California uses their top 2. They have a jungle primary, they call it, and then the top 2 go on to the general election. This is like an expansion of that. Some states do 5, some states do 4. Because in California, you could end up with 2 Democrats, or if you have, who's running the election right now? There's an election in Washington State is running an election right now, where it's a pretty blue state, but there's so many Democrats running. They're worried that they might have 2 Republicans on their general election ballot. 4 and 5 kind of corrects that eventuality. And again, we're not really pushing for something like that here in Virginia because our crowded fields are in primaries, and we already have open primaries because we don't register by party. So when you show up on primary day, you either say, I want a Republican ballot or a Democratic ballot, or if you usually vote Democratic but there's not a Democratic primary, you can show up and just participate in the Republican primary, or vice versa. So we don't have that system that disenfranchises independents or third-party voters. So again, that's why we focus mostly on applying RCV to local elections and primaries, and I'll get into that a little bit more. But I'm going to keep going with the benefits, and I promise I will.
Has Virginia recently? You comment on that?
Oh, the Virginia one. So the biggest use of ranked choice voting so far in Virginia was in 2021. The Republican Party of Virginia used ranked choice voting in their unassembled conventions during COVID to nominate Glenn Youngkin, Winsome Earl-Sears, and Jason Yanis. All 3 of them were nominated with ranked choice voting. And we have heard anecdotal evidence of people who worked for other gubernatorial candidates who said, oh, we have all this negative stuff ready to go on Glenn Youngkin, but we couldn't use it because it's stupid ranked choice voting. Oh no, we have to focus on policy. But they held their fire because they couldn't afford to alienate someone else's voters if they were going to build that coalition against it. It's also a pretty poorly kept secret that one of the reasons they chose to use ranked choice voting was because there was a divisive, polarizing selectively popular candidate in the mix, and they suspected that if she won that primary, which she could do, she was never going to win on a general election statewide ballot. And so they said, oh man, we need a system that requires the candidate to get to 50%. Also, what a great gift to the parties that we're saying, here, pick your most broadly appealing candidate. That's going to do well on a general election ballot, especially in a state like Virginia. So it worked. Clearly, it worked for them. And then it went so well, they then used ranked choice voting to nominate several congressional candidates and even a House of Delegates candidate.
Where?
Including here, actually. They nominated candidates in, I'm trying to remember the timeline, in 2022. So 21 was the statewide. 22 they nominated in the 10th, the 11th.
We did not use it in the 10th.
In the Republican primary. In 2022? Man,
No.
that's what I was told. We'll talk. All right. But it was used in in-house nominating contests. And the reason that it was available is because those were party-run processes. They were firehouse primaries, or they were conventions, or they were caucuses. There is not the option in Virginia yet to use ranked choice voting in a state-run primary. The only state-run elections where ranked choice voting is allowed are if a city or county adopts ranked choice voting, they can use it for board of supervisors elections or city council elections. So I know a lot of times I get to that example and people are like, wait a minute, but it's because, again, the party got to make those rules. All right. So ranked choice voting eliminates spoilers, and this kind of means two different things. One, we think of spoilers, especially every 4 years, right? Every 4 years in a presidential election, there are some independents or third-party candidates, and there ends up being a lot of discussion about what it means to vote third party. Are you throwing your vote away, or are you voting on principle? And people get, feelings get really big around that topic. And a lot of times, a third-party candidate will get just enough votes in just the right places to potentially affect the election. And they're called spoilers, for a reason, right? They really can move that map. But with ranked choice voting, you can vote for the Jill Steins, the Ralph Naders, the Ross Perot. You can vote for any of those candidates you want if they are speaking to your priorities. And you can still then rank someone from the major parties in your second or third slot. And you can still have a voice in that ultimate decision. So the other way that spoiler is used, a lot of times you'll have two candidates who are similar in some way, right? Either they're from the same neighborhood, they're from the same part of the ideological spectrum, they're from the same racial background, they're two women, they're two young candidates, they're whatever it is. And they will split the vote in some way. They will split a certain voting block in some way. Ranked choice voting is going to correct that math. There ends up, because of that, there ends up being a lot of gatekeeping, and the kind of power brokers within the party will often say, not only do we already have someone in this position, but we already have someone like you. We already have someone who checks that box. And so people, especially non-traditional candidates, are generally told to wait their turn. And ranked choice voting means that you can all be in the race without hurting someone else's chances. You don't get that zero-sum game mentality. And again, benefit 3 plus benefit 4, it comes out to equal benefit 5. You get more non-traditional candidates elected. The fact that negative campaigning is diminished, which disproportionately affects women and candidates of color, plus the fact that there's less gatekeeping, you're lowering the barriers to entry. And more people from more backgrounds are going to get in the race, and a lot of times benefit from this style of election. This is just an example of an RCD ballot for those people who don't fill out the cookie ballot. This is what Arlington has been using, some of their voter education. Arlington has been using RCD since 2023. It is the weirdest selection of desserts. But something for everybody, I guess. constitutional candidates? Okay, this is a map of where and how ranked choice voting is used in the US. And really my favorite thing about it is how many colors are needed on this map to show all the ways that RCV is used. Because RCV is not a political ideology, it's a tool. It's a way of counting its maps. So I love that we have all these light purple states, and all of those states have at least one city or county that uses RCV locally. You've got the two dark purple states, Alaska and Maine, who use RCV statewide. Hawaii uses RCV for their special elections. And then you can see we've got Arlington and Charlottesville, love those little dots. And then you've got the southeast portion of the country. And I love, they use ranked choice voting to solve a very specific problem. So those are the 6 states that have a majority requirement in their constitutions. If you have 3 or more candidates in the race and no one gets to 50%, the top 2 go on to a runoff. Everybody comes back 4 weeks later. We see this in Georgia, especially in the Georgia Senate elections the last couple cycles have made this process national news. But it's all 6 of those states that operate that way. So if you are an overseas or military voter, how are you going to vote in that runoff? There's no way for them to tally the results, certify the results, print the new ballots, get them out to you, have you fill them out, get them back. You can't do that in 4 weeks. So the way they solve that problem is that they use ranked choice voting. If you are overseas and you get your ballot, you will get your regular ballot, you'll fill it out. You will also get your runoff ballot with everyone's name on it. So you rank your choices. If your first choice doesn't make it to the runoff, then your vote's going to count for your second choice, or your first available choice that you received your vote in the runoff gets your vote, so you get to participate. So ranked choice voting in Virginia, we covered some of this. The bill that implemented the current local option is from 2020, featured by Hillary Hudson and Charlottesville, and it allows, again, for localities to adopt RCV for their Board of Supervisors elections or their City Council elections. The Arlington County Board has used RCV for both primaries and general elections. They have a county board election every year, which is very nice for us. There's been an RCV election every year for us to learn from. And they have made it permanent for their primaries, and they're on their second pilot within a pilot this year, using it in their general election. And then Charlottesville, again, did a pilot within a pilot, and they used it for their city council primaries this past June. Our goals, and I touched on these briefly. In Virginia, we don't have our close primaries, and we don't tend to have crowded general election ballots. Sometimes local, especially if there's localities that have nonpartisan elections with their primaries. Like there's always a bunch of people who run for mayor in Richmond, for example. But usually, the problem we're trying to solve exists in primaries. So our goals are to expand the local option so that a locality could say, I want to use it for Board of Supervisors, but also we always have a ton of people run for Commonwealth attorney. And use it in a way that makes sense to them. They can use it for all local and constitutional offices, or they can pick and choose in a way that makes sense to them. And then we want to apply it, we want to make it optional for the parties to use in primaries in a state-run primary election. So we want to be able to say, this is now a tool in your toolbox. If you look up and you say, oh my God, there's going to be 8 million people running for this open seat, then you can have ranked choice voting as a way to navigate that. If you don't have it, or you don't want to use it, you do not have to. Again, our path is pretty permissive. We're all about giving people options to run elections and collectively. Okay. Before we do questions, does everyone have their cookie ballots? All right, before you stand up, I have to count it. They got 22 ballots. So, here we're going to do some quick math. What is, to get to a majority, how many votes is the winning cookie going to need? 12. Yeah! 22. 12 is the majority. Okay. If Oreos is your first choice go to the back corner?
I'm filming, but I go to Chips
Okay,
Ahoy.
so Chips Ahoy, okay. If you're Nutter Butter, you go to the back table. Nutter Butter, okay. If your first choice was Milano's, why don't you go right over to like the right side of the
That's my
table. And then if your first choice was Fudge Stripes, come up here with me.
Oh, look at that.
Oh, all right, Mario, tell me what you got. All right, 5 for Oreos. Chips Ahoy, you got 2. Nutter Butters, 33.
Is that 2 for Chips Ahoy?
Yes, 2 for Chips Ahoy. Yes, our videographer. All right, Milanos. How many are over there?
12.
Yeah, you guys.
11.
Is it really 11?
Yeah, I counted.
All right, thank you. All right, and then Fudge Stripes. Oh, so proud. Well, Fudge Stripes has the fewest first choice votes. So now I would like you to please go to the group that has your second choice. So Milano's has now crossed the 50% threshold. Usually this is slightly more exciting. But Milano's has won with over 50% of the vote. Yes.
Can you just do it for the third round? Because I'm curious how.
Sure.
Just
Absolutely. So the next
say you go into 60% or
Perfect.
something. Yeah.
So the next lowest vote getter is Chips Ahoy. So if you can just point.
So
So where would you go?
wait, that's my question.
Yeah.
So we're the third group. So do we go by the second one
You
or
go
the
to-
third
so now
one?
that Chips Ahoy is not available, you just go to your next.
The second one.
choice.
So if I were to go to Milano and Milano is supposed to be broken up, then I go to my third. Is that how it works? Why do you choose?
Yes, if Milano had the fewest votes,
Yeah.
Milano wasn't so crowded over there.
Right, right.
Yes. Milano had. If your second choice was also eliminated, then.
Okay, I was wondering how it worked with the 1, 2, 3.
So some people try to get very strategic about this, and honestly, like it's a pretty hard system to game. So some people go, "Ooh, I love Oreos so much, I'm going to vote for them 3 times." I mean, you can. The machine will read it. It's fine, but no one looks at your second choice until your first choice is not an option. So by the time if you vote for Oreos 3 times, by the time they're going to look at your second vote for Oreo's out. So it's just, voting for Oreo 3 times is exactly like voting for Oreo 1 time.
So then it keeps track of, all right, she took her first and second choice. She has to go for another, so it's going to the third choices.
If you voted
And
for Oreo
so on,
3
so-
times
okay.
and then you voted for Chips Ahoy,
That's probably rare.
Oreos was eliminated,
Yeah.
then yeah, they go, well, Oreo's out, Oreo is. In Arlington, they had 6 candidates that time? 6 candidates and 2 winners. In Charlottesville, only 3 candidates and 2 winners. So it was not like the textbook case for ranked choice voting by any stretch. And one of them did win, like, by a lot on the first ballot. Yeah, maybe cross the threshold as well. So again, like, it was a pretty anticlimactic ranked choice voting election, but it was still a ranked choice voting election. That's how people campaigned, that's how voters made their decisions. The part that dictated candidate and voter behavior was ranked choice voting. They ranked their candidates. Again, turns out we didn't need to go to a second round tabulation, but I would still call it a ranked choice voting election. Yes?
So would the electronic ballot look somewhat like this, except there would be names and you'd mark 1 by 1, 2 by 1? Because I'm just thinking about the feeding it into the steamer and being an election officer.
Yeah. So you have your paper ballot. Go back to the Arlington one, because even though it's sticky toffee pudding, this is roughly what their ballot looked like. You would, with your pen, their current software only has 3 rankings available. When they upgrade, it'll go up to 6. But right now, they only have 3. So you take your pen and you fill in your favorite in the number 1 column, your second favorite in the number 2 column, your third favorite in the
They're
number 2
just be
column.
people's names instead of desserts. Okay, thank you.
And it does,
Two cookies would be left out. 2 cookies would be left out in your choices.
Yeah,
in
right.
that situation,
In that
yeah,
situation.
but I think, so it makes me crazy, because usually when, like, you'll read an article about this, and every article you read gives you like that one paragraph blurb about how it works, which is great, but usually it says, and you rank everybody best to worst, favorite to least favorite, top to bottom, and no, you don't. You rank the people you sometimes I hear from people who are concerned about ranked choice voting, they say, well, it's going to force me to vote for someone I don't like. And I think if you have 5 candidates and 5 rankings, I can see where you would think that. But you don't, unlike Australia, you do not have to use all of your rankings. You don't have to show up at all that day. You don't have to vote for anybody in that office. You can vote for just the one person you like. If you can't stomach the idea of anyone else, leave it blank. I mean, or you can vote for them 5 times, but it really is going to be the same thing. The number of rankings is determined by software and ballot design. The number of candidates is determined by who qualifies for the ballot. So you might have 10 candidates, you might have 12 candidates in a congressional primary and only 6 rankings. Because realistically, you probably don't like all 12 of them. And that's a big ask of voters to say, rank 1 through 12. I mean, at some point, around like, 6 to 9, you're gonna be like, no, it's alphabetical. I like no one's not. Maybe I'm sure there are people. But I feel like your top 5 or 6, you probably know. And you go, I really only like 3. I'm allergic to peanut butter and I hate chip chocolate. I don't. You can rank just 1 or 2 or 3. And then you can stop. And if all 3 of them lose, then your ballot is invalid. But otherwise, you have to vote for someone you don't like. I mean, if you show up and you vote for someone with only 1 choice and they don't win, then you lose. This way, you've got more shots at voting for someone who wins. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I was going to ask a question, but I did want to just point out, from what you're saying, using the form for ranked choice voting, you are changing the behavior of the voters and you're changing the behavior of the candidates. So even if all of the votes tend to be heavy to one side, you're still having an effect by using ranked choice voting.
That's what I think as well. Because one thing I really like about our CV is it relieves all of us election nerds of the burden of being a pundit. We all think that we're going to figure out who's going to split what vote, what are my neighbors doing, this demographic's going to vote for this, and like all of us watch a lot of people news and read all of our political content, and we're trying to vote smartly. And a lot of times we have this conflict of like, do you vote for who you think's going to win, or do you vote for the person who really like spoke to you? And a lot of times that's not the same person. And this lets you just go in and vote. Just vote honestly. I like this person. I know they're probably not going to win, but I like them. And I'm going to let whoever is looking at election data know that I like them. And if people get to vote honestly, we're going to know more about what message is actually resonating with voters. And then you still get to vote for someone who's a more likely candidate, and probably still have a voice in that final discussion. So yes, so absolutely, I think voters approach it differently. I think especially after a couple cycles, like once ranked choice voting becomes something voters are used to using, you're going to do more candidate research. You're going to want to know at least 6 of them to rank, or at least 3, whatever it is. More candidates are going to knock on your door because even if you use someone else's yard sign, it's still worth their time to come talk to you. It is. I'm going to put a caveat on this and not promise because there's not enough data. Data suggests that there is a correlation between RCV and voter turnout. Again, correlation is not causation. It's new enough in the US that there's really not enough data to say for sure. But I do think it makes sense. You feel like your voice is going to be heard. You get to vote for the person you like. Probably someone has come and knocked on your door, because you all know this, every conversation that has to do with voter education starts with, did you know there's an election happening? Right? Every RCD conversation with a voter starts with, do you know there's an election happening? Do you know where you go? Do you know what's on the ballot? Then you get to fill it out. But the more campaigns are having a conversation with voters, the more voters are going to feel engaged in the process. And we talked about how voters, or how candidates behave in an RCD election. You see the New York City primary that just happened, the mayoral primary. The political, the political positions of the winner aside, because people, if you love Zoran Mamdani or if you hate Zoran Mamdani, let's take that out of the equation. The way that process went was unprecedented. You had candidates cross-endorsing. You had candidates showing up together and doing events together. You had prominent people endorsing their top four. It changed the way the campaigns operate. And then you had Andrew Cuomo, who did not engage. He said, I'm ranking myself one and I'm leaving. And that's fine, that's his right. And he knows New York politics. But he got fewer second choice votes than he probably would have if he actually kind of got in the spirit of things. It was really exciting to watch just how ranked choice voting can change the process. It was their second time using it in a mayoral election. And the first time they nominated Eric Adams. So it's not that it always, nominates a Democratic socialist either. Eric Adams also showed up to that primary and broke himself in 3 times. So, we're good use of this time. Any other questions? Yes?
Back to me.
Go.
Does it change anything about how they do audits or anything different about the security of the systems?
You can audit a ranked choice voting election. Not really is the short answer. Everything's done on paper ballots. Everything is scanned with the machines. You get a cast vote record of the whole thing. Maybe some folks have updated software enough that they don't need this, but most places are then going to use an open source third-party piece of software called the RC Tabulator. And it was designed by the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center. They're nonpartisan. Again, it's open source. Anyone can look at this. So it's very transparent, and the state has entered into an agreement with them to use. So it's free to the localities to use it. So that cast vote record gets fed into that process, and there does the other rounds of tabulation, but that's the only real technical piece that's different. Otherwise, it is just the how many rounds of software. But yes, you can audit it, you can do all the checks and balances, and the machines have to operate the same ways. Yes, ma'am.
One more question. So is the number of columns, how many choices you get?
Yeah.
Is it? It's not dependent on how many candidates there are. It's dependent on that locality.
The software,
or
the ballot design.
Okay.
Yes. So there usually are more candidates than rankings.
Are
So
there-
that's why I try to get away from that language of ranking top to bottom.
Are there guidelines for the different localities who would use it about how many rankings they should use, or is that something that's
They're really hemmed in, like Arlington in particular is really hemmed in by their current software. They're getting all new machines in the next year or so, so it was a short-term problem that they decided was acceptable. So again, they were hemmed in by the three. I think it's only that system. They have unison voting systems. But for example, Charlottesville had HART voting systems. They had 6 rankings. There are thoughts, there are best practices that it's, within like X number of, between the number of candidates and the number of rankings. But there's no hard and fast rules, and there's definitely no like specific guidelines from the state.
something else to argue about, I would think.
I'm sure it is. Yeah. Yes.
So let's talk about using rankings voting for like local elections and party primaries. What is
before that comes back before the General Assembly hopefully passes. There's just a lot of pieces of the General Assembly right now, a lot going on. So we're hoping to focus on expanding that local option to and more offices and more localities, getting more localities to kind of opt into this optional use of RCV. And then hopefully in 27, they would pass the law that gives the parties the option to use ranked choice voting in party primaries above the local level. So that would be General Assembly, that would be statewide offices, that would be congressional elections, and even potentially president.
So the software isn't free, which is one of the reasons why Charlottesville City broke the laws, because they didn't install the software on the
The RC
laptop.
tabulator software?
Right.
Okay.
They didn't install it on the laptop that was supposed to be designated for use to run the software, because they would never be able to use that laptop for anything else, and they didn't have a real budget. Here in Loudoun County, we do use the Unison system. We are limited to 3 candidates because of that
3
software.
rankings.
Three rankings because of that software. So, in addition to that, there is an additional cost that you're not talking about, directly related to labor. The process of actually executing a ranked choice voting election here in Loudoun County, when the polls close, if you're involved in elections now, you understand that all that equipment has to go from the precinct back to headquarters. And that usually doesn't get done and accomplished until about 11 o'clock at night for all 133 precincts that we have. In order for us to do a ranked choice tabulation, you have to break the seals in every single one of those USB thumb drive envelopes that comes back from every 130 of those precincts. 107, sorry, thank you. And then that has to be witnessed, inserted into a laptop so that the tabulation can actually take place, so that the CDRs can be extracted from those machines. So it's not just a monetary cost, there is a time cost, there's a labor cost, and then we get to the transparency cost. If you want to be able to audit something like this, which has not been done here in Virginia yet by anybody, there has to be a process, a procedure, and transparency for both parties to be able to witness that. And until that framework happens, we probably shouldn't do it. On top of that, we don't even get 100% turnout now in Loudoun County. We have 306,000 voters, people who are registered to be able to vote. At best, we get 75% of the total voting population turnout in a presidential election. So we've got a lot.
That's high. That's high.
It's not 100%.
No, but that's high compared to the rest of the country.
And it was way more than 70%.
If you're looking for complete representation, which is the
You're never gonna get complete.
I understand, but if you listen to the sales pitch, part of the reason to do this is to get higher turnout and more representation.
Sure.
But based on our behavior as a county,
I want my vote to count. That's why I want ranked choice
your
voting.
vote does count.
Not really, because it's right now as it's choosing between the lesser of two evils is how I see it now. And I want to be able to have more choices.
Well, that's our public debate, though, isn't it?
Yes.
What I
This is
heard
true.
was,
Thank you for coming in.
what I heard that ranked choice voting can change the campaign behavior.
Yep.
You can change the voting behavior.
Yep.
And I think we're in a space now we need both. So
Yeah.
I'm very excited about this.
I'm glad that you're here having this conversation. It could all just be adults and be nice to each other now.
But
Well,
we
we
can't.
could.
We can't. We can't. It's not happening.
So I think this is a great dialogue, but probably not necessarily, what we're, the direction we need to go.
Thank you for coming out.
Yes, the voters will decide ultimately.
I will acknowledge, like, the labor aspect, like, there are changes to election administration that come with this, and that's part of the reason we presented as an option, right? Like, because Arlington and Charlottesville are a lot smaller than Loudoun. So if Loudoun decides that the juice is not worth the squeeze, then they don't have to use it. Like, we are not looking for a statewide mandate for local elections. We voter options. So if that just is something where they go, this is not a big enough solution to a big enough problem to justify these changes, then they will make that decision.
Well, before I thank Liz, I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight. I also want to acknowledge again Lorraine Mappa, who made this possible by her partnership with the library. And again, really just so informative. There's a lot of information here tonight. I think we're sort of preaching to the choir about voter engagement. But if you do need more information about, where you need to vote, helping other people with voting, there's a table back there. We have clipboards up here for UpVote, which is a rough petition that Liz was talking about.
You can scan that QR code, same thing.
You can scan the QR code. We also have a clipboard here. If you're interested in getting any information or getting on the mailing list for the Loudoun League of Women Voters, the name is a little misleading. We welcome men also. We would love to have you, and we would love to, if you want to join us for informational purposes only, we're happy to have you. There's a clipboard up there. So Liz, thank you so much for this really